Hello, thank you for coming. I think we're going to start. This is Planting for Pollinators. My name is Nadine Charlton. I am a master gardener. I am the owner-operator of Blumenfield's Flower Farm. We're located just outside of Enderby. And we currently have 3.5 acres of cut flowers in production. And while, of course, we need to harvest flowers prior to them being pollinated, we plant extras to ensure that there are always masses of flowers left over for the pollinators. So we're going to start really simple today. What is pollination? Pollination is the transference of pollen from the anthers of a flower, and that's the male bits, to the stigma of another flower, which is the female bits. This transfer of pollen can be on the same plant or to another plant, and it enables the plant to produce seed. Pollination can occur in some plants through wind and water, but 90% of all plant pollination requires the use of another organism, also known as a pollinator. So why should we care about pollinators and pollination? Well, almost 90% of flowering plants require pollinators for fertilization, and the pollinators are responsible with providing us for 1/3 of the food that we eat. So just imagine if 1 out of every 3 bites of food was missing from your day. So what did you have for breakfast today? And what did you have for lunch? Now imagine if 1/3 of that was gone. And now imagine that and just think about how hungry you would be if you were missing 1/3 of your foods. So let's take a look at some of the common foods that we eat every day that are at risk of disappearing if we lose pollinators. Honey, this is the easy one because honeybees have been in the news quite a bit lately. But we also have tree fruits like apples, peaches, lemons, bananas, avocados. We've got berries like strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, cranberries, raspberries. There's melons, onions, tree nuts like almonds and cashews and coconut. Beans, which includes green beans, kidney beans, black beans, coffee beans. But if you're not a coffee drinker, don't be smug because tea is also on the list, so it gets us one way or the other. It also includes vanilla, oils like sunflower oil, sesame oil, tomatoes, cucumbers, other vegetables like cauliflower, broccoli, squash, beets. It includes sugarcane, which would take away a lot of our sugar, agave, which is necessary for tequila, alfalfa, which is necessary for dairy products as the cows eat alfalfa, and cacao beans, which is chocolate. Chocolate. I mean, do I even have to continue with the presentation or we're on board now, right? Okay, so enough about chocolate. This isn't just about the human food source, though. Pollinators are responsible for pollinating many seeds, fruits, and berries that we don't eat directly, but that are eaten by small birds and mammals. Pollination is the beginning of the food chain. Pollinators aren't doing this because they care about us or about the food chain, though. They are doing it because they visit the flowers to feed on the pollen or to drink the nectar. This is the original symbiotic relationship. There are about 200,000 species of pollinators. Most people, again, think about honeybees when they think about pollination, and while honeybees are extremely important, equally important are the over 800 species of native ground and twig nesting bees that are in Canada. Native bees pollinate many, many crops, and in many cases are much better at transferring pollen than the honeybees. Other pollinators include hummingbirds, bats, small mammals such as mice, insects such as beetles, flies, bees, ants, wasps, butterflies, and moths. So we've determined that pollinators are important to our food chain, both directly and indirectly. So what can we do? Well, firstly, minimize the use of insecticides and spray only when pollinators are least active, which is after dark or just before dawn. Minimize the use of herbicides as native weeds provide food for native pollinators. Till the ground as little as possible to protect ground nesting pollinators. And we can plant flowers that will provide food and shelter for pollinators, which is really what you came to this room to hear about. So let's get to it. What to plant to get some more pollinators? There are many options for plantings, and they can include annual flowers, perennial flowers, shrubs, and trees. Large flowering trees are often forgotten when discussing pollinators, but large trees that are densely covered in thousands of flowers provide very efficient foraging for pollinators. Densely covered plantings means that the pollinators require less energy to search for food sources than if they are spaced further apart. The types of flowers to plant varies depending on what type of pollinators you are looking to attract. If you're looking to attract bees, then you would plant something that is bright white, yellow, or blue-purple flowers. Definitely anything that's scented will attract bees. And anything that has a mass of tiny flowers. So think about alyssum or oregano, thyme, lavender. Bees are always really attracted to those. If you're looking to attract hummingbirds, then we're looking for bright red, white, bright orange, blue, and anything in those funnel-shaped flowers or something that's shaped like a cup. For butterflies, we're again looking for bright colors, but very specifically red and purple. And again, we're looking for flowers that have the narrow tubes or a flower that has a flat landing pad. For moths, we want pale reds and purples, pinks, light blues, and white. But most importantly for moths is we really want flowers that have a strong evening scent, as most moths are more active at night. Of course, I would recommend having varied plantings to attract different types of pollinators for the most varied ecosystem. And along that note, you should attempt to provide blooms of different flowering plants throughout the growing season, especially in the early spring and in the late autumn. Plants that bloom in early spring are necessary for bees that have depleted their winter stores of honey and are coming out of hibernation hungry. Some of the earliest bloomers are dandelions, forsythia, crocus, heather. Also important are plants that bloom in the heat of summer and at the end of autumn, right into that late autumn, because these provide a meal after the profusion of spring blooms has come and gone. And by choosing a variety of plants that bloom throughout the year, you're staggering those blooms and therefore continuing that food supply for those pollinators. So, don't own a tract of land? No problem. Pollinators are not fazed by city life, and they are just as happy visiting flowers that are in pots on a balcony as they are visiting flowers in a field. So even if you don't own a plot of land, you can still do your part to plant for pollinators. However, if you do happen to own some farmland, you can do your part by adding some natural habitats into an existing farm system. Adding natural habitats into a farm system helps pollinators, but also increase the yields of the crops by attracting more pollinators than a monocrop ever can. Abundant and healthy populations of pollinators will improve fruit set and quality as well as increase fruit size. And I know I've got a picture of an apple up here, but that goes for everything that gets pollinated. So if we're talking about grains or sunflower seeds or apples, it all counts. You can also provide habitat for pollinators through the use of hedgerows, natural brush, or buffer strips. Hedgerows are mini nature preserves that provide much needed nesting, foraging, and shelter for mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians. Mixed hedgerows support a wide diversity of insect species because they consist of trees, shrubs, and ground covers that all flower at different times of the year. Hedgerows are a major boost to the biodiversity of a farm. And I'm really proud to take this opportunity to announce that I have ordered 1,000 shrub seedlings that are going to get planted this spring. So these seedlings are going to be planted to create a full hedgerow around the entire growing field of Bloom & Fields Flower Farm. And the hedgerow will consist of a variety of native shrubs that have been specifically selected to provide flowers and berries throughout all 4 seasons. So let's get into some tips and tricks. So the first thing is that you want to plant pollinator plants in groups to increase efficiency. If a pollinator can visit the same type of flower, it doesn't have to learn how to enter a different flower, and it can transfer pollen to the same species instead of wasting pollen on unreceptive flowers. This is vastly different than planting a monocrop, and that's not what I'm talking about. We're still looking for variety, but plant the variety of plants in groups for pollinator efficiency. So note the groupings of lavender in the bottom left-hand corner, the groupings of hollyhock up here. There's a lot of variety in this picture, but they are in groups. So I've already mentioned this, but it's worth mentioning again. Plant a diversity of plants to support a variety of pollinators. Try to incorporate flowers that are short, flowers that are tall, flowers that are tubular, flowers that are flat. Planting of flowers of different colors, different scents, different heights, these all attract different pollinators, as every different pollinator has a different set of needs. Sometimes you don't even have to plant. Some native plants that we consider weeds are extremely excellent sources of food for pollinators. And as important as doing things for pollinators is, not doing things is just as important. And what I mean by that is don't keep a perfectly tidy lawn and garden. Ensure that you leave some bare, unmulched soil for ground nesting bees. Leave areas with dead wood and some leaf litter for other insects. And practice IPM, which is integrated pest management, instead of spraying pesticides for pests. When selecting plants for pollinators, first look to native plants. Plants that are native to the area have evolved to support the specific need of specific pollinators. Remember that this is a symbiotic relationship between the plant and the pollinator. So next, if you are selecting non-native plants, please ensure that the plants you select are not invasive, as invasive plants can push out the native plants. Lastly, stick to the more common varieties of plants, as many new varieties that have been developed by plant breeders have definitely not been bred with pollinators in mind. Varieties with double blooms or flowers in colors that are vastly different from their native counterparts often prevent pollinators from finding and feeding on their blooms. Also, some cultivars don't have the same quantity or quality of pollen or nectar. Think about pollenless lilies, for example. These are great on a dining room table because the pollen isn't going to be dropping on grandma's tablecloth, but they do nothing for the pollinators without the pollen. One resource that I would highly recommend everyone check out is Pollinator Partnership Canada. Pollinator Partnership Canada is a registered charity that is dedicated exclusively to the protection and promotion of pollinators. They have fantastic information as resources for more information on this topic. Most importantly, and the reason that I would encourage everyone to check it out, is they have eco-regional planting guides for all across Canada. And they go into very specific detail about the regions, the native plantings, and the pollinators within. You can see what I've done is I've pulled this up for the Okanagan area. They've separated it into 3 very separate areas of the Okanagan. So it's very detailed, and it's talking about your home. So let's get into some specific plants that you could plant for pollinators. We'll start with some native plantings. So Saskatoon bush will attract bees, flies, and of course produces some lovely berries that make fantastic jam. I am, yeah, yeah. There's hundreds of different varieties of flies as well, and they pollinate. Not everyone will, but many varieties will pollinate as well. Red osier dogwood is another native plant. This will attract butterflies, and it adds winter interest to your garden as the bright red twigs will contrast with the snow. Oregon grape attracts bees and butterflies while it's in bloom, and the berries feed the birds over the winter. It also has four-season interest in your garden, providing yellow flowers in the spring, berries in the summer, red foliage in the fall, and as an evergreen, it retains its foliage all winter, so it's really quite a spectacular plant. Chokecherry attracts bees, butterflies, and moths as pollinators. And again, it feeds the bees with the berries over the winter. And the berries on this one also make excellent jam, and I've been told a really nice liqueur. A lot of you will recognize the snowberry, as we have quite a bit of this around. This attracts bees and butterflies and provides fall and winter interest with the white berries. Showy milkweed attracts butterflies and hummingbirds. Showy milkweed is also the host plant for the declining monarch butterfly larva. What this means is that this is the only plant that the larva of the monarch butterfly will eat. So the loss of these plants is a direct loss of those butterflies. These are very easy plants to grow, and the monarch butterflies will flock to your yard. Blanket flower will attract bees, beetles, and butterflies. Lupine will also attract bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds. Okay, let's take a look at some non-native plants. So the first one I want to talk about is salvia. Salvia is available as an annual and as a perennial, but many of the perennial varieties will not survive our winters, so be sure that you check before you purchase your salvia. Salvia will attract bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds. I planted this annual variety called Lighthouse Red, and it was a huge hit with the hummingbirds. And I think you can see why. The bright red, that tubular shape, we couldn't keep the hummingbirds off of it. The next one is calendula. It attracts bees and butterflies, but is also an excellent addition to the garden because of its medicinal properties and its ability to attract beneficial insects to the garden, such as lacewings and ladybugs. Calendula also comes in some amazing colors these days. It does come in the traditional yellow and orange, but it's also now available in doubles, in peaches, and in many mixed colors. Lavender. There are many types of lavender to choose from. You will have heard of English lavender, you will have heard of French lavender, Spanish lavender, which is actually French lavender, and many hybrids. So most are tender perennials in this zone, so they may need a little winter protection, but once they're established, they are drought and heat tolerant. And although it may be confusing to pick a variety of lavender for us, there's no confusion to the bees. Bees love lavender, as do most humans because of the smell, let's face it. Not only is it a boon to the bees, but lavender can be used in everything from aromatherapy to culinary applications. Again, there are many, many different varieties of cosmos. I'm confident that there is a cosmos for everybody. They will attract birds, butterflies, bees, and moths. So I'm going to spill my dirty little secret. I used to despise yarrow. I would cringe whenever I saw it planted in someone's garden. However, I now grow yarrow, and it has actually become one of my favorite flowers. It blooms early in the year. If you deadhead it, it will rebloom again. It is extremely easy to grow, and of course, it is drought tolerant. Aquila millefolium is the native species of yarrow, which blooms in white. I'm sure you've seen this a lot around here. However, there are also cultivated varieties that produce flowers in yellow, red, terracotta, peach, burgundy. It attracts bees and butterflies. The next one is herbs, oregano. Oregano will attract bees, lots and lots of bees. It's also, of course, a fabulous addition to the herb garden. Other herbs that will attract bees are borage, bergamot, chamomile, chive. We talked about lavender, sage, thyme. Again, there are a lot of flowers that are multiple flowers on one, so bees are really attracted to those. Sunflowers. Sunflowers will attract bees while they're pumping out all that pollen, but after the bees have done their job and the seeds are set, sunflower heads will also attract many small birds. These are available in many colors, including yellow, orange, red, and even white now. Please note that there are pollenless varieties available of sunflowers, and while they are really good for the dining room table, pollenless varieties are terrible for pollinators. So please, if you're going to plant for pollinators, please choose sunflowers that are the traditional varieties and come loaded with pollen. And note that if you do plant sunflowers, they will likely self-seed, as the birds will inevitably drop some seeds as they're gleaning from them. So the next one is echinacea. This is another dual-purpose flower that is excellent for the medicinal garden as well as the pollinator garden. It will attract bees, butterflies, and small birds. It's available in many colors, including yellow, purple, fuchsia, red, white. There's even a lime green available now. It's also drought tolerant and virtually maintenance-free after the first year. This one's a keeper. So Monarda, another name for Monarda is bee balm, so I'm pretty sure you know what this one attracts. Another really good addition to the pollinator garden that could also show up in an herbal garden. Bee balm is available in red, pink, purple. It attracts bees, of course, but butterflies and hummingbirds also love it. Scabiosa is available again in annual and perennial varieties, and they can bloom from spring right up to frost. They are available in white, purple, pink, red, the elusive black that's so hard to find in flowers. The thing about Scabiosa is that it is unusually high in nectar for a flower, so these plants will attract all manner of pollinators, including butterflies and hummingbirds. And this one is also drought tolerant. I don't know about you, but I think there's probably no greater joy than watching a fat bumblebee try to crawl it headfirst into a snapdragon flower. Anyone that's ever given this more than a passing glance will know the intricacies that I'm talking about. Snapdragons are annuals. They are available in many colors, and maybe surprising to some people, they have a really beautiful but delicate scent. Foxglove. Bees, bees, and more bees. So I have many foxglove plants on our property, and when I harvest the foxglove flowers first thing in the cool mornings, I will often find bees that have curled up inside the flowers to sleep for the night. I think I've given you lots of reasons why planting for pollinators would be a good thing in your yard, gardens, and fields, but if you need a couple more, here they are. 1, planting for pollinators means that you will end up with some really beautiful flowers in your yard that you get to enjoy the sight or smell of as well. Flowers like zinnias, cosmos, nasturtiums, they're beautiful and they're well loved by pollinators. 2, native species of plants need relatively no maintenance or water aside from the first year to get them established, so they're a pretty no-brainer. 3, many plants that can be planted for pollinators can also feed us. So if you choose to plant herbs, they're going to be much loved by bees. If you choose scarlet runner beans, you've just created a magnet for some hummingbirds. So you can think about how it's helping them, but also helping you. And 4, planting for pollinators will encourage biodiversity, which is good for everybody, including the plants themselves. When huge blocks of cloned plants are planted, it narrows the gene pool for that plant, and therefore it makes it vulnerable to disease and pests. So more variety, more pollinators, get out there and plant. So we've got some opportunity for questions, and we have a roving microphone. So if anyone has any questions, James will bring you the mic.
Nadine, you mentioned that you were planting this hedgerow. What were
Yes.
some of the shrubs that you were planting?
We have chosen Saskatoon. We have chosen a viburnum. The red osier dogwood went in there. I chose lilac, common lilac, the standard, and I'm missing one. You don't know. It is, yes. So it's going to be something that's blooming pretty much all year, and then once the blooms are finally fading in the end of at the end of the autumn, then the berries will take over and provide some food for the birds in the winter. And then the other really nice thing about that is that now we've created that natural habitat around us. So the reason I'm doing it is partly for pollinators, but partly because I really want to get that natural habitat around our growing fields. I would love to see some more snakes in there. I would love to see, some more little critters making their homes in there, because all of that makes a more varied ecosystem that takes care of a lot of the pests that might be causing me problems right now. So rather than jumping on the pesticide bandwagon, I'd rather jump on there's something that's going to eat this. If we are more balanced, there's something that's going to take care of it. So.
I have a great big, I don't need the mic.
No, I needed to record.
Oh, okay. I have when I moved into the property about 30 some years ago, it was like a flowering crab, and it's huge now. And every spring it's white. The whole thing is white, and you stand near that thing and it just buzzes.
Great.
And it's beautiful, because once the blossoms, it lasts about a week. And once the blossoms have gone, then the little berries form, and they're like a small crabapple. And our bay window is right there. And every day I stand there and watch that tree and the birds and the downy woodpeckers. And then we had two, I guess they're partridges that are there. And they've eaten the berries, all the ones they can reach. They get to the end there and they fall off. And I noticed even the chickadees now are eating those.
Yep.
And I've got a tanager that comes through every year, and he starts banging on these. So it really is beautiful, because
Yes.
you go from the bees to the birds, and I watch them all the time on this beautiful tree.
And that's a really good example of how, planting something that is helping pollinators or is helping the ecosystem, look how much we get back out of
I
it.
just
So,
love
if you want to think that you're being selfish by doing that, go ahead, take advantage of it.
It really is wonderful to watch. And we've got all the bird feeders that we feed all winter, and we've got the quail feeders underneath this tree. So we stand there and watch the quail, and then the odd bobcat come and chase the quail. I'm on an acreage, but still, it's just beautiful. The enjoyment we get out of that bay window and watching
Brilliant.
that whole thing is just
Brilliant.
unbelievable. So it's not just flowers. It's it is flowers, but it starts there and then ends up,
Exactly.
with these other animals
Exactly.
that frequent around that area. So
That's
it's
brilliant.
lovely.
Thanks a lot. I'm interested in planting a shade garden this year. So native plants or non-native plants, what would you suggest?
I would always lean towards did everyone hear the question? He's interested in planting a shade garden, and he's asking, would I suggest native plants or non-native plants? I would always start with the native plant selections, unless you're extremely picky, if you already know what you want. But if you're wide open, I would always look to the native plants first, just because, they have that relationship with native pollinators already. And the other thing is the ease of maintenance for you is so much less. So I would start with those, and then if you pick a few of those, and then you can open up your box to the non-native selections from there. And again, you'd want to pick things that are don't just pick spring bloomers. Make sure you've got something that's blooming in July and August as well.
Right. Like, could you give me an idea? Like, maybe write it down. I'll get it afterwards. The native plants that would be most adapted to shade garden.
For shade garden. Yeah. Yeah. I'll get you a list after. Can I get you a little list after?
Okay, like there's some ferns that are around.
Yeah,
and-
yeah, some ferns. Now, ferns don't do a lot for the pollinators because ferns they're so ancient, they don't really have that connection. They do their own thing. But yes, definitely a lot of native ferns that are absolutely beautiful. Definitely some hostas, not considered necessarily native, but amazing, and they're going to take off and be super easy for you.
I was thinking of planting coleus.
Coleus?
Yeah.
It's not a native species,
No.
but yes, that would work definitely. Again, you're not getting any blooms out of a coleus. It's just the foliage that you're getting on that. It's stunning. It's going to set off your other greenery, but you're not actually adding any blooms to your garden if you do that.
Yeah.
Not a bad choice. Just depends on what you're looking for.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate the seminar and what you're saying. So thanks very
Thank
much.
you. Did you have a question as well? Any other questions? Thank you very much.